My name is Camila, and I'm 27 years old. I'm a dental hygienist living in Kansas City, Missouri, and for the last 5 years, my entire life has been a lie built on a silent sacrifice that nobody even knew existed. A sacrifice that earned me a gut punch of a welcome at my own father's Thanksgiving table. A welcome that sounded like an executioner's final decree. You can move to the laundry room or leave, my dad announced at a family dinner, his voice cold and final. You understand, don't you? My brother Jacob actually had the audacity to smirk. He smirked. I walked out of that house and that life that night, numb with betrayal. But days later, the real cost hit them, and I got to call my father, choking on panic. Wait. She covered everything. If you've ever sacrificed everything for your family and been completely betrayed, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. You won't believe what happened next. You have to understand the context of the betrayal. I didn't stay at home until I was 27 because I was lazy or couldn't afford to move out. I stayed because my father got sick. He was diagnosed with diabetes and high blood pressure 3 years ago, and his medications were astronomical, really expensive. My mother passed away when I was 19, and Dad had stepped up for me then, helping me through nursing school and encouraging my switch to dental hygiene. I didn't mind stepping up for him when he needed me. It felt right, a natural responsibility. It turns out that stepping up meant carrying the entire load. For 3 years, I wasn't just contributing to the household. I was paying for everything. His prescriptions, the house bills, the groceries, everything else. His medications alone ran about $800 a month. Then there was his supplemental insurance premium, another $300. The mortgage payment was a steady $900. Utilities averaged $200, and groceries, gas, and household expenses were easily another $400. That means I was paying over $2,500 a month, sometimes more when he needed expensive endocrinologist visits. All told, I poured nearly $90,000 of my own savings and my future into keeping that house afloat and keeping my father alive. And here's the punchline, the cruelest joke of all. No one knew. Not my dad, and certainly not my golden brother Jacob. My father, bless his ignorant heart, was so stressed about his diagnosis that when I said I'd handle the finances, he made a catastrophic assumption. Thank goodness for Medicare, he'd said. At least that covers most of it. I started to correct him, to explain the co-pays, the expensive supplemental plans, the medications that weren't fully covered, but he was so relieved I'd just let it slide. Over time, he completely convinced himself that the government was covering his healthcare costs. He never asked about a single bill. He just assumed. And Jacob? Jacob was 32, living his best life in Denver with his wife, Stephanie. He rarely visited, maybe twice a year, and he never, not once, offered to help financially. When Dad got sick, Jacob's response was a fruit basket and a card that read, "Get well soon." That was it. No phone calls, no offers to split the medication costs, nothing. He was the one who could throw money at a problem, but he chose not to. They both thought I was just throwing in a few extra bucks for utilities and groceries. They had no idea I was literally funding my father's entire life. That ignorance, that assumption of my expendability, is the poison that led to the Thanksgiving nightmare. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, the poison started to seep in. Jacob called Dad out of nowhere. I heard Dad get excited, then concerned, then uncomfortable. When he hung up, he looked stressed. Jacob and Stephanie are having some trouble, Dad said slowly. Financial trouble. They might need to move back here for a while, just temporarily. My stomach dropped. Move back here? Into our little 3-bedroom house? Well, yes. Where else would they go? He's my son, Camila. Family helps family. The words stung like acid. Family helps family. I'd been helping family for 5 years straight, sacrificing my savings in my 20s, but apparently, that only counted when it was invisible and convenient for them. Jacob was the prodigal son who was welcomed home, no questions asked. I was just the fixture they decided needed to be moved. They started planning for his mid-November arrival, leaving me less than 3 weeks to brace for the invasion. I tried to push down the anxiety, but it bubbled up, cold and heavy in my chest. I knew this was the start of the end, but I had no idea just how low they would stoop. The low point arrived 2 weeks later. A cold Tuesday afternoon, and there was Jacob's big truck pulling up into our driveway. I was just getting home from my shift, still in my scrubs, when I saw them unloading boxes. So many boxes. Jacob waved. That same smug confidence already back in his voice. "Hey sis, surprise! We're a few days early." Stephanie, standing beside him, looked at our modest house like it was a prison sentence. She'd always been that way, acting like everything about our family, our house, our city, was beneath her. I had years of practice ignoring her toxicity. "Dad didn't mention you were coming today," I managed, trying to keep my voice neutral and failing. Jacob started hauling boxes toward the front door without bothering to look at me. Last-minute decision. The landlord in Denver wanted us out by the end of the month, so we figured, why wait? Dad's inside. He's helping us figure out the sleeping arrangements. Sleeping arrangements. The phrase sounded like a death knell in my head. I followed them inside, my heart slamming against my ribs. Dad was in the hallway, looking stressed, and when he saw me, he couldn't meet my eyes. "Camila, good. You're home. We need to talk about rooms." I knew exactly where this was going. I suggested the only logical option. "The storage room? We could clear it out." Stephanie interjected immediately, wrinkling her nose as if she'd just stepped in something unpleasant. "It's full of junk and there's no closet." "That wouldn't work at all." Jacob nodded in agreement, and then they dropped the bomb. The thing that proved I was nothing more than furniture to be moved. "We were thinking, since you're just one person, maybe you could take the laundry room," Jacob said, totally serious. "We could put a futon in there or something. It's only temporary after all. A few months at most." I just stared at him, my brain refusing to process the words. "The laundry room? You want me to sleep in the laundry room?" I asked, my voice a hollow whisper. Jacob, defensive now, muttered, "It's not that small. And like I said, it's temporary." I turned to Dad, begging him with my eyes to intervene, to defend me, to stand up for the daughter who had kept him out of foreclosure and bankruptcy. But he just stood there, shifting his weight, avoiding my gaze. He chose them. He chose their comfort over my dignity. "What about all my stuff?" I asked quietly, looking at my life reduced to boxes. "My bed, my dresser, my clothes?" Stephanie, without missing a beat, decided my fate. "We can store most of it. You really don't need that much space anyway." The words were a dismissal, a final declaration that my entire existence was inconvenient. That night was a nightmare. I barely slept on the futon they'd crammed into the laundry room. The room reeked of detergent and mildew, and every time the water heater kicked on, the whole place hummed and rattled. My clothes were hanging on a pathetic tension rod over the utility sink. My entire life, my entire identity, was compressed into 100 square feet of humiliation. I lay there, staring at the fluorescent light, the anger starting to solidify into something cold and dangerous inside my heart. I had paid for this house, this life, this comfort, and my reward was a bed next to a washing machine. The next few weeks became a masterclass in being made to feel utterly unwelcome in my own home. Jacob and Stephanie acted like they were on an extended vacation at a hotel, where I was the annoying staff member who kept getting in the way. Stephanie immediately started remodeling the kitchen that I had paid for. She shoved my favorite mugs to the back and replaced the coffee maker I bought with some expensive espresso machine they brought from Denver. The old system didn't make any sense. She sniffed, not even looking up from her phone. But the real insult came when I went to get my lunch bag. The blue lunch bag I'd used since college was gone. "Did you see a blue lunch bag?" I asked. "Oh, that old thing," she said with a dismissive sip of her espresso. "It was taking up space, so I tossed it. You can just buy lunch today." She actually threw away my personal property, then had the audacity to suggest I could afford to eat out because, after all, working at a dentist's office, I must make decent money. The ignorance was stunning, the entitlement breathtaking. I didn't bother correcting her about my job or how all that decent money was being spent. I just left for work. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. They were treating me like hired help, a temporary inconvenience whose belongings were disposable. And Dad did nothing. The final straw, the breaking point, was Thanksgiving Day. I was foolish enough to hope that maybe, just maybe, we could have one normal family meal. I had volunteered to cook the turkey and make my grandmother's stuffing recipe, the one Dad loved. I was holding on to some illusion of family connection, but it was just another setup for humiliation. When I crawled out of my miserable laundry room bedroom that morning, Stephanie had already taken over the entire kitchen. "I'm doing Thanksgiving this year," she announced without a hint of apology. "No offense, but I have standards." I tried to hold on to my tradition. "I was going to make Grandma's stuffing," I said quietly. "That old recipe? Way too much butter. I'm doing a quinoa version. Much healthier, she scoffed. Dad walked in and actually looked at my face, sensing my pain. Camila makes wonderful stuffing, he said weakly. And then Jacob jumped in, the self-appointed health guardian who hadn't contributed a single dollar to Dad's health in 3 years. Dad, you have diabetes and high blood pressure. Stephanie's way is better for you. You should thank her for caring about your health. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I'd been caring about Dad's health for 3 years, monitoring his diet, managing his pills, attending every single doctor's appointment that I had rearranged my work schedule to attend. But I swallowed the scream. I swallowed the rage. I swallowed the betrayal. The dinner itself was tense. A dry turkey and a bland quinoa stuffing that Jacob, the hypocrite, praised like it was a 5-star meal. Dad just picked at his food, occasionally glancing at me with that apologetic expression I was getting so desperately tired of seeing. That apology was worthless because he never followed it with action. After dinner, of course, no one else volunteered to clean up, so I was the convenient staff member again, washing the dishes. While my hands were submerged in soapy water, Jacob and Stephanie cornered Dad in the living room. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. The snippets of a conversation that proved I was right. Not just a few months. Makes sense. Already settled. Fair. She's taking up space. My hands froze. They weren't done taking. They were done with me. I dried my hands and walked to the living room doorway. What's going on? Dad looked uncomfortable. That was his permanent state now. Jacob and Stephanie explained the update. Their situation in Denver is more complicated than they thought, Dad said. They might need to stay longer. How much longer? Indefinitely, Stephanie said, not even pretending to sound apologetic, until we figure things out. Which brought them to the related topic. Jacob, looking at Dad instead of me, added, The house is getting crowded. 3 adults is manageable, but 4 is pushing it. And let's be honest, Camila is the only one without a spouse here. It doesn't make sense for her to take up a whole bedroom when she could easily get her own place. I felt physically slapped. This is my home, I whispered. It's Dad's home, Jacob corrected. And he needs to think about what's best for him long term. Stephanie and I are planning to stay and help him. Really help him, not just throw money at the problem. Throw money at the problem. My voice came out sharper, laced with a rage I couldn't suppress. Is that what you think I've been doing? They thought I was just chipping in a little, and now they were using my financial help as a weapon against me. Dad finally spoke, and his words were the sound of something shattering inside my chest. Camila, maybe they have a point. You're young. You should be building your own life, not spending your 20 seconds taking care of your old father. And Jacob and Stephanie are here now. They can help. Help. The word was laughable, a cruel joke. They'd been here 3 weeks and hadn't contributed a single dollar to anything. So, what are you saying? I asked Dad directly. You want me to leave? He hedged, weak and spineless. Not leave exactly. Just maybe it's time to think about your future. Jacob jumped back in, enthusiastic again. Exactly. Or you could take the laundry room if you really want to stay. We just need a proper bedroom. The words hung in the air like poison. I looked at my father, the man I had paid for, the man whose prescriptions I had picked up every single month, whose medical appointments I had sacrificed my job for, and he was telling me to move into the laundry room or simply get lost. You can move to the laundry room or leave, Dad repeated finally, completely unable to meet my eyes. You understand, don't you? Jacob, that arrogant, entitled worm, actually repeated it, smirking. That smirk. It was the moment I realized he thought he had won some kind of game. But this wasn't a game. It was my life. It was their debt. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just turned my back on them, walked straight back to that miserable laundry room, packed my few remaining clothes into the 2 suitcases I'd brought home from college years ago, and called my friend Kelly. There was nothing left to talk about. My father had made his choice. And now, so would I. I drove away from that house, the house that was legally my dad's but financially mine, to my friend Kelly's apartment in Midtown. My hands were shaking so hard on the steering wheel I could barely keep the car straight. I was homeless. I was betrayed, and I was furious. Kelly, bless her, didn't talk much. She just hugged me. When I finally broke down crying at midnight, the next few days were a blur of work and silence, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life when my savings account was paper thin because I had been paying for literally everything. But the silence was about to end. On the 4th day after I left, Dad called. His voice sounded off. Camila, I need your help with something. I'm trying to refill my prescriptions, but the pharmacy says there's an issue with payment. My stomach tightened. They're saying the card on file was declined. Of course it was declined. That card was mine. I hadn't had a chance to update it with my new address, but that wasn't the real reason the payment failed. I told him I'd take care of it and hung up. I sat on Kelly's couch, staring at my phone, and then it hit me the entire foundation of their staggering ignorance. I remembered that conversation years ago, right after his diagnosis. Thank goodness for Medicare, he'd said. At least that covers most of it. I realized he had genuinely convinced himself the government was covering his healthcare costs. He never asked about the bills. He just assumed. And Jacob and Stephanie definitely assumed it too. Their little snide remark at Thanksgiving about me, just throwing money at the problem, made that perfectly clear. They thought I was tossing in some extra cash here and there, not that I was literally paying for their entire existence. I called Kelly over. I told her I needed to show her everything. I pulled up my bank statements from the last 3 years on my laptop. The sheer volume of the numbers was sickening. Dad's medications alone were about $800 a month. Supplemental insurance, another $300. Mortgage, $900. Utilities, groceries, household expenses, another $600 at minimum. Kelly looked at the screen and breathed. Camila, you've been paying over $2,500 a month, sometimes more. She asked if Dad or Jacob knew. I don't think so, I told her. Dad never asked. He just assumed. Medicare covered everything, and Jacob's never been involved enough to know any different. So they kicked you out thinking you were just helping a little bit, not realizing you were funding his entire life, pretty much. Yes, that was the perfect summary of the betrayal. They discarded their golden goose for the sake of a spare bedroom. The vindictive part of me wanted them to figure it out the hard way. The responsible part, the part that still loved my dad despite everything, knew I couldn't just abandon him. Not permanently. I'm going to talk to him, I said, finally deciding on a plan. But not yet. Let them handle things for a few weeks. Let them see what it actually costs to take care of Dad. It wasn't just revenge, it was an education they desperately needed. The pharmacy started calling again the next day and the day after. Each time, I coolly told them I was working on the payment issue. By day 7, Dad called me 3 times in one day, desperate. Camila, I really need those medications. The pharmacy says they can't fill them without payment. I remained calm, ice in my veins. I know, Dad. I'm figuring it out. I don't understand why this is so complicated. Can't Jacob just pay for it and you reimburse him? There it was. The blatant assumption that these life-saving medications cost maybe $50 or $100, not the crushing $800 they actually ran. The trap was set. Sure, Dad. Have Jacob call the pharmacy and put his card on file. Jacob called me 2 hours later, and oh how sweet it was to hear his voice stripped of every trace of that arrogant Thanksgiving smugness. Camila, what the hell? The pharmacy just quoted me $800 for Dad's medications. That can't be right. I kept my voice steady. Professional. That's the monthly cost. Sometimes it's more depending on what the doctor prescribes. $800? Are you serious? I thought Medicare covered this stuff. The ignorance was still there, but now panic was overriding it. I calmly explained the reality. Medicare Part B covers some things. The supplemental plan covers more, but there are still copays and medications that aren't fully covered. The diabetes medications alone are expensive. How long have you been paying this? He asked. Every month for the past 3 years. Silence. I could practically hear the calculations frantically running through his head. That's almost $10,000 a year just on medications. More, actually, I corrected, a cold satisfaction creeping into my voice. When you factor in the doctor visits and the supplemental insurance premium. More agonizing silence. Then the deflection. Then why didn't you tell us? Why didn't Dad tell us? Dad doesn't know the actual numbers. He thinks Medicare handles everything. I never corrected him because what was the point? The bills needed to be paid regardless of who knew about them. He finally cracked. Well, we can't afford $800 right now. We just moved across the country. We've got expenses. I sealed the deal, my voice calm as a tomb. Then I guess you'll need to figure something out. Maybe talk to Dad about applying for assistance programs or look into cheaper generic alternatives. The pharmacist can help with that. Camila, come on. You can't just stop paying for this. He needs these medications. I'm not stopping permanently. I'm just taking a break while you and Stephanie handle things. You said you were there to help him. This is helping. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Then what did you mean, Jacob? When you said you were there to really help, not just throw money at the problem, what exactly did you think helping looked like? He didn't have an answer for that. I hung up. The bomb had landed. I hung up on Jacob and immediately felt a sharp, familiar jab of guilt. But Kelly, who had been listening to the whole conversation, shook her head fiercely. Don't you dare feel bad. They literally kicked you out of your home. They can handle Dad's bills for a few weeks. She was right, but the guilt didn't just go away. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a terrifying highlight reel, imagining Dad without his blood pressure medication, his glucose levels spiking, ending up in the emergency room. By 3 a.m, I had convinced myself I was being cruel, that I was no better than them. But then my phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. It was an ugly, entitled message designed to trigger my guilt and shame. This is ridiculous. Your father's health is at stake, and you're playing games. Grow up. The guilt evaporated immediately. Playing games? They took my room, dismissed my entire life sacrifice, and told me to sleep next to a water heater. And I was the one playing games? The sheer audacity of her entitlement was a cold shock that reset my resolve. I turned off my phone and finally went to sleep. The next morning, I got a call from Dad's doctor's office. They needed to confirm his appointment for the following week and verify insurance information. I'd always been the one to handle his care, keeping everything meticulously organized in a binder I had left behind at the house. My voice was flat, professional, and entirely detached. I'm not managing his care anymore, I told the receptionist. You'll need to speak with Jacob or Stephanie. I gave them Jacob's number and hung up. An hour later, Jacob texted me, his tone still panicked. Why is Dad's doctor calling me? Where's his insurance card? Where are his medical records? I didn't respond. They wanted to really help. Now they could prove it by navigating the chaotic mess of chronic illness care that I had quietly streamlined for 3 years. The true financial hammer dropped 2 days later. The mortgage payment bounced. I had been paying it directly from my account through an automatic withdrawal, but I had canceled that the day after I moved out. The bank, naturally, called Dad, who called me in a full-blown panic. Camila, the bank says the mortgage payment didn't go through. There must be some mistake. It's not a mistake, Dad. I canceled the automatic payment. Why would you do that? The house could go into foreclosure. Then Jacob and Stephanie should make the payment. It's $900 due on the 1st of the month. $900? I thought it was less than that. It's been $900 for years, Dad. I've been paying it every month. The silence on his end this time was truly deafening. Finally, a quiet, shaky question. How much have you been paying altogether? For what? For everything. The mortgage, the medications, all of it. I took a deep, steadying breath. This was the moment of full, undeniable truth, and I made sure every word landed like a cinder block. Around $2,500 to $3,000 a month, depending on the month. More when you had specialist appointments or needed extra medications. $2,500. His voice trailed off, the reality finally crushing the fantasy he'd lived in. Camila, I didn't know. I thought Medicare was covering most of it. I thought you were just helping with groceries and utilities. I know you thought that, Dad. I didn't correct you because you were stressed enough about being sick. I figured it didn't matter as long as the bills were paid. But that's over the past 3 years. That's around $90,000, give or take. The sheer magnitude of the number $90,000 sank in. He didn't say anything for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was shaky and utterly defeated. I need to talk to Jacob. Good idea, I said, cold and clinical, and hung up. That night, Kelly came home to find me stress-eating ice cream on her couch. I told her the numbers, the total amount, the complete shock. Good. He should be in shock, she said. We both knew Jacob and Stephanie, living beyond their means, had no way to cover that kind of cost. My end game was simple, born of 3 years of quiet rage and 20 days of betrayal. Honestly, I want them to understand what I've been doing. I want them to appreciate that I wasn't just throwing money at a problem. I was sacrificing my own future, my own savings, my own life to take care of Dad, and I want an apology for being treated like I was the burden. I knew the truth was ugly, painful, and necessary. They had wanted me gone, so I was gone. Now they got to handle everything I was handling. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no texts from Dad or Jacob. Nothing. They were in the hole I had dug for them, and they were trying, desperately, to claw their way out without admitting defeat. I started to worry. The responsible daughter ingrained in me screaming that something had happened, that Dad had ended up in the hospital, or worse. But I forced myself to wait. They had asked for this. They had wanted me out of the way so they could handle things. On day 12, after I had loaded up my car and driven away, the silence was shattered. Stephanie showed up at Kelly's apartment. I saw her, through the peephole, arms crossed, face absolutely furious. Her mask of superiority was cracking, replaced by sheer panic. I almost didn't open the door, but I did. "We need to talk," she said the second I let her in. "About what?" I asked, my voice flat, challenging. "About the fact that you've left your father high and dry. About the fact that his utilities are about to be shut off because apparently you were paying those too. About the fact that he's almost out of his medications, and Jacob and I don't have $800 to spare right now." She remained standing, rigid, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Kelly had wisely retreated to her bedroom, but I knew she was listening to every word. I decided to give Stephanie the simple, brutal truth, finally verbalizing the resentment I had been quietly financing for 3 years. "You're right," I said calmly. "I was paying the utilities and the medications and the mortgage and the groceries and pretty much everything else." "Well, you can't just stop. That's abandonment." She actually used the word abandonment. The sheer hypocrisy made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. "Is it?" I asked, leaning slightly forward. "Because from where I'm standing, I was abandoned, kicked out of my home so you two could have a comfortable bedroom, told to sleep in the laundry room or leave. Those were my options, remember?" Stephanie's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "That was different. We needed the space. And I needed a home," I countered, the calmness in my voice making my words sharper than any shout. "But nobody cared about that. You're being dramatic. We didn't kick you out. We just suggested you might be more comfortable elsewhere." She was still trying to rewrite history, still trying to minimize the calculated cruelty they had inflicted. I let all the suppressed anger bubble to the surface, but I kept my tone even, allowing the facts to carry the weight of the fury. "You threw away my lunch bag. You took over my bedroom. You treated me like hired help who was getting in the way. And when I finally left, nobody stopped me. Nobody said, 'Wait, we need to talk about this.' Nobody apologized. You wanted me gone, so I'm gone. Now you get to handle everything I was handling." Stephanie resorted to the ultimate guilt trip. "Your father could die without his medications. Then you better figure out how to pay for them. We don't have that kind of money right now. We're still recovering from Denver." The excuse of their own financial mess was the final pathetic touch. I stood tall, ready to deliver the final crushing number. "And I don't have that kind of money anymore either. I've spent $90,000 over 3 years taking care of Dad. My savings are gone. I'm 27 years old with almost nothing in my bank account because I prioritized his health over my own future. I can't afford to keep doing this." Stephanie's composure completely shattered. Her eyes went wide. $90,000, give or take. She sat down, then, heavily, on Kelly's couch. The number was real. It was tangible. It was devastating. Jacob said it was expensive, but I didn't realize. "Nobody realized," she mumbled. "That was the problem. You all assumed I was just chipping in a little here and there. You had no idea what it actually cost to keep Dad healthy and the house running. And instead of being grateful, you treated me like I was the problem." She finally asked the question that revealed her complete loss of control. "What do you want from us?" "I want an apology. I want acknowledgement of what I've done. And I want to know that if I come back to help, things will be different. If I'm treated with respect, if my contributions are recognized, if I get my bedroom back." I paused, knowing the honest answer. "But honestly, Stephanie, I don't think that's going to happen. I think you and Jacob are going to resent me even more now that you know the truth. You're going to feel guilty and defensive, and that's going to turn into anger directed at me." She didn't deny it. That told me everything I needed to know. She left shortly after, leaving me with the exhausted, shaky relief of finally saying what needed to be said. That night, Dad called. His voice sounded older somehow, tired in a way I had never heard before. The weakness in his tone wasn't about his illness. It was about the crumbling of his entire reality. Camila, I need to apologize. Okay, just one word. I wouldn't make it easy for him. I had no idea how much you've been doing. No idea what you've been paying. The sheer disbelief in his voice was sickening. He was a grown man, and he was surprised by the cost of his own life. Jacob showed me some numbers and I couldn't believe it. All this time I thought Medicare was covering things. I thought you were just helping out a little bit. I know, Dad. The anger was still there, but beneath it was just sheer exhaustion. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were already stressed about being sick. I didn't want to add financial stress on top of that. I thought I was helping by just quietly taking care of things. You were helping. You've been saving my life, Camila. Literally. His voice broke then, finally, genuinely. And I repaid you by choosing Jacob over you, by letting them push you out. I'm so sorry. The apology should have been everything I wanted, the ultimate vindication for my years of sacrifice. Instead, I just felt tired. It didn't change the fact that they saw me as expendable. What are you going to do, Dad? About the bills, the medications, everything. He told me about the conversation he'd had with Jacob, the really long talk. He's going to take over the mortgage payment. Stephanie is going to start paying for groceries. They're going to contribute while they're living here. That's good, I acknowledged, but I knew the main problem remained. But the medications, the insurance, the medical bills, Camila, that's more than they can handle right now. They're already stretched thin. The utter selfishness of it was still breathtaking. They could cover their own financial issues, but not his life-saving care. I talked to my doctor about cheaper alternatives and we're working on that. I also applied for some assistance programs. But in the meantime, you want me to keep paying for the medications? Just until we figure out the assistance programs. I know I have no right to ask. I know I don't deserve your help after what I did. I closed my eyes. This was the moment I had been dreading. The moment where I had to choose between holding my ground, maintaining the crucial boundary I needed to set, and the absolute fear of my father suffering. The responsible daughter won one last time. I'll pay for this month's medications, I said finally, the words heavy and final. Just this month. After that, you need to have a plan in place. The assistance programs, cheaper alternatives, whatever it takes. I can't keep draining my savings, Dad. I need to think about my own future. I understand. Thank you, Camila. Thank you so much. I had to set the last, most painful boundary. But Dad, I'm not moving back. Not right now. Maybe not ever. I need space from all of this. I understand that too. I don't blame you. After we hung up, I sat on Kelly's couch and cried. Not from sadness, not exactly, but from the sheer, crushing emotional exhaustion of it all. Kelly just handed me tissues and let me cry. The next morning, I called the pharmacy and paid for the medications. $847. Money I couldn't really afford but couldn't not pay. When I checked my bank balance afterward, I had less than $2,000 left in savings. 3 years of work, 3 years of sacrifice, and that's where I ended up, kicked out and broke. But something shifted in me that day. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep putting everyone else first at the expense of my own well-being. I was done being the good daughter. I was done being the family ATM. Something shifted in me that day. I paid the last, painful $847 for Dad's medications. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep putting everyone else first at the expense of my own well-being. I had less than $2,000 left in savings. Years of work, years of sacrifice, and this is where I'd ended up, kicked out and broke. But that rock bottom was the best thing that ever happened to me. I immediately started looking for a second job, something I could do on weekends to rebuild my savings. I also started looking for my own apartment, something small and affordable that would be truly mine. I needed to build my own life, separate from all the drama with my family. 2 weeks later, I found a studio apartment in Midtown. It was small but clean, and the rent was manageable, especially with the weekend administrative job I'd picked up doing work for a catering company. Moving into my own place felt like starting over. I didn't have much furniture, just a bed and a small table, but it was mine. Nobody could tell me to move to the laundry room. Nobody could throw away my things or rearrange my space. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I was trying to move on, trying to put distance between myself and the toxicity, but they wouldn't let me go quietly. Even after my tense showdown with Stephanie, where I threw the $90,000 number in her face and watched her composure shatter. They still tried to rope me back in. Over the next month, the calls didn't stop. They were requests for help with various expenses. The water heater needed to be replaced. Could I chip in? The car needed new tires. Could I help? Dad needed to see a specialist. Could I cover the copay? Each time, I said no. Each time it got a little easier. I was done being their financial safety net. Then, the final, explosive collapse came. Jacob showed up at my new small apartment one Saturday morning. He looked haggard and utterly defeated. There was no anger, no entitlement. He just looked tired. I almost said no, but the pure, genuine distress in his face made me let him in. He sat at my small kitchen table, put his head in his hands, and delivered the shocking news. Stephanie left. She went back to Denver 3 days ago, he said. She couldn't handle living in Dad's house anymore. The truth was darker. She couldn't handle Kansas City, and more importantly, she couldn't handle being broke. She was filing for divorce. She was right to leave, he mumbled. This whole thing had been a disaster from the start. He looked up at me, and I saw something I had never, ever seen in my brother's face before. Humility. I screwed up, Camila. Big time, he confessed. I thought moving back here would be easy. I thought Dad didn't need much help. I thought you were being dramatic about the bills and the expenses. I had no idea, he finished, finally admitting his ignorance. And now you do, I said, the pain and ID, the triumph finally mingling in my voice. Now I do, and I'm drowning. The mortgage alone is killing me. I can't afford to keep living here, but I can't afford to leave either. I asked him what he wanted from me. He shook his head. Nothing. I'm not here to ask for money or help. I'm here to apologize. Really apologize, not just say the words. What Stephanie and I did to you was wrong. The words were a bitter balm to the wound they had inflicted. Kicking you out, taking your room, dismissing everything you'd done for Dad, it was all wrong, and I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air. Part of me wanted to throw it back in his face, too little, too late. But the sight of his brokenness, the total shattering of his arrogance, made me believe he meant it. Thank you, I said finally. I appreciate that, he continued, resolving his own life. I'm going to move out. I found a cheap room to rent across town. Dad's not happy about it, but I can't keep living there. I'll still help him, with what I can, but I need to figure out my own life first. He paused at the door, delivering the final piece of unexpected honesty. For what it's worth, you were a better child to Dad than I ever was. You actually showed up when it mattered. After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment and processed everything. Stephanie was gone. Jacob was moving out. Dad was essentially on his own again. And somehow, for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about any of it. I had earned my peace. That night, after Jacob left, Dad called. I knew what was coming. The entire ecosystem of enabling and denial was collapsing around him. Jacob told you what happened, he stated, not asked. He did, I confirmed. I'm going to be by myself again. Jacob's moving out next week. I was thinking maybe you could move back. I know that's a lot to ask, but my answer was immediate, firm, and absolute. There was no hesitation, no guilt, only clarity. No, Dad. No, I'm not moving back. The refusal hung in the full air, heavy and sharp. This was the moment I chose myself, unequivocally. I have my own place now, my own life, and I like it, I continued. He stumbled, desperate. But I need help. I can't manage everything on my own. I shut down his dependency with a dose of brutal pragmatism. Then hire help. There are services that help seniors with daily tasks, medication management, all of that. I pushed the financial point, the cruel reality they had forced. You can afford it now that you're not supporting 2 extra adults. He tried to pull the heartstrings, the ultimate parent trap. That's not the same as family. Maybe not, I countered, my voice laced with the pain of 5 years of exhaustion. But family is supposed to be a two-way street, Dad. It's not supposed to be one person sacrificing everything while everyone else takes and takes. I'm done sacrificing. I'm 27 years old, and I need to start living for myself. The silence on his end was long, uncomfortable, and finally, resigned. I understand, he said quietly. I don't like it, but I understand. 3 months after that conversation, I was thriving. I was building the life they had tried to steal from me. The second job with the catering company turned into a full-time opportunity as their office manager, which paid significantly more than my dental hygienist position. I kept both jobs because the financial security of two incomes changed everything. My savings account, which had been nearly empty, started to rebuild. I bought actual furniture for my apartment. For the first time since my mom died, I felt like I was living my own life, instead of existing in service to someone else's needs. Dad and I spoke occasionally, brief phone calls where we kept things surface level. He had figured out the assistance programs, found cheaper medication alternatives, and hired a part-time aide to help with groceries and household tasks. He was managing, though he made sure I knew it wasn't easy. Jacob was also slowly rebuilding his life. His divorce from Stephanie was proceeding, though not amicably. He'd found steady freelance work as a graphic designer and seemed genuinely humbled by the whole experience. We grabbed coffee a few times, awkward attempts at rebuilding a sibling relationship, but we weren't close. The damage ran too deep. I was content. I had my boundaries, my career, my independence. I thought I had weathered the storm and finally earned my peace. I was wrong. The toxicity wasn't done with me yet. The story they chose to tell the world about the sacrificial daughter who was kicked out was about to be rewritten by the bitter father who was left behind. I was about to find out that Dad had a new narrative, one where I was the villain. I was about to be forced to take my final, most public stand. I thought I was free. I thought setting boundaries and walking away had earned me peace. I was focused on my new job, my new apartment, my new life. Then one Tuesday in February, 3 months after I left, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Margaret from Community Home Health Services. She was the aide assigned to help my father. My stomach tightened instantly. "I'm calling because I'm concerned about some things I've observed during my visits," Margaret said. And then she delivered the final, crushing betrayal. "Your father has mentioned several times that you abandoned him, that you refused to help him despite being financially capable. He's told me you're selfish and that you've left him struggling while you live comfortably." Heat flooded my face, a rage so cold and intense it made me physically shake. He said I abandoned him, multiple times. He was painting himself as the victim and me as the villain, conveniently leaving out every detail that made him look bad. I asked Margaret one question. Did he mention that he kicked me out of the house to make room for my brother and sister-in-law, or that I paid nearly all his expenses for 3 years? Before that happened? Margaret was quiet for a moment. No, he didn't mention any of that. Of course he didn't. After hanging up, the anger was blinding. Dad was telling people I'd abandoned him. He was rewriting history to make himself look good, playing the victim after he kicked his own daughter out. I called Jacob. I wanted to see how far the lie had spread. Jacob hesitated, but confirmed Dad had been complaining, wishing I was more involved. He's telling his home health aide that I abandoned him, that I'm selfish and refusing to help. I spat into the phone. I gave him 3 years of my life, Jacob. 3 years and $90,000. I put my own future on hold to take care of him, and this is how he repays me. What are you going to do? Jacob asked. I don't know yet, I said, the venom clear in my voice. But I'm done protecting his feelings. That weekend, I drafted a detailed email. This was not an emotional letter. This was a legalistic, factual document, a weapon forged from 3 years of financial sacrifice. I included scanned bank statements showing every single payment I'd made. Mortgage payments, utility bills, medication receipts, insurance premiums, everything. I wrote a precise timeline of events, from the day Jacob and Stephanie moved in to the ultimatum and the moment I drove away. I even included Stephanie's vile text messages calling me ridiculous for not paying for Dad's medications immediately. The subject line read, "Setting the record straight." I sent it to Dad, Jacob, and every single extended family member who Dad had apparently been complaining to about my supposed abandonment, aunts, uncles, cousins who had been hearing his one-sided, self-pitying story. The email was clinical and factual. No emotional appeals, no dramatics, just dates, amounts, and receipts. The numbers spoke for themselves. The responses started coming in within hours. My Aunt Patricia called first, her voice full of shock. "Camila, I had no idea. Your father made it sound like you just stopped caring about him. These numbers, honey, this is incredible. You've been supporting him all this time." More calls and emails followed. Family members who'd heard Dad's version were shocked by the cold, hard reality. Some apologized for believing him without question. Others just expressed disbelief at the amounts I'd been paying. All along, they realized the victim they were feeling sorry for was actually the exploiter. Dad didn't call. Not that day. not the next. The truth had landed, and he was silent under the crushing weight of his exposed lies. A week later, I got a text from Dad. No, not a call, a text. A distant, impersonal request. We need to talk in person. I waited 2 full days before responding. I wouldn't rush to his convenience anymore. My response was clinical. Fine. Kelly's coffee shop on Main Street, Saturday at 2 p.m. I chose neutral territory, a place where he couldn't play the wounded man in his own house. Saturday arrived, cold and gray, typical February weather in Kansas City. I got there 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table. My stomach was in knots, but I had mentally rehearsed this conversation a dozen times. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Dad walked in exactly at 2 p.m., looking older than I remembered. The past few months had aged him. He leaned heavily on his cane. He spotted me and made his way over slowly. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sitting down across from me. "You said we needed to talk, so talk." I didn't try to soften my tone. He flinched. "That email you sent, that was unnecessary, was it?" I challenged. "Because from what I hear, you've been telling everyone who will listen that I abandoned you." "That seems pretty unnecessary too." I was venting. I was hurt. He tried to justify his lies. "You were lying." I leaned forward, intense. "You left out every single detail that made you look bad. You didn't mention kicking me out. You didn't mention the $90,000 I'd spent. You just painted yourself as a poor, abandoned father and me as the selfish daughter. Did you really think I'd just let you do that?" He tried to retreat to dignity. "I didn't think you'd air our family's private business to everyone. It stopped being private when you started spreading lies about me. You made this public, Dad." I just corrected the record. He stirred his coffee, avoiding eye contact. I was angry. "You have to understand from my perspective, you just left. You stopped helping. I felt abandoned. You told me to move to the laundry room or leave. Those were my only options. What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to understand that we were family, that we work through problems together, like how you and Jacob and Stephanie worked through the problem of me being in the way by kicking me out. We didn't kick you out. We just needed the space." "Dad, stop," I said, my coffee cup hitting the saucer with a hard clink. "Just stop rewriting history. You chose them over me. You let them take my room, my space, my home. And when I left, none of you tried to stop me. You all seemed relieved I was gone. Tell me honestly, when I loaded up my car and drove away, were you sad or were you relieved that the awkward situation was resolved?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Here's what I don't understand," I continued, pressing the wound. "I spent 3 years taking care of you. I sacrificed my savings, my social life, my own future to make sure you were okay. And the minute your golden child showed up needing something, you threw me away like I was nothing, like those 3 years meant nothing." Dad's hands shook as he wrapped them around his coffee cup. "What do you want from me, Camila? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. I don't want an apology. Not anymore. I wanted one 3 months ago when it might have mattered. Now, I just want you to understand what you did, and stop playing the victim. I do understand." That email made everything very clear. "You've been more than generous." "Generous?" I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Is that what we're calling it now? Not sacrifice, not dedication, just generosity? Like I was doing you a favor instead of acting as your daughter." "What do you want me to say?" he pleaded. "I want you to admit that you took me for granted. I want you to admit that you treated me like I was expendable while treating Jacob like he was precious. I want you to admit that you failed me as a father." Dad's face crumpled. "You're right," he said quietly. "I did take you for granted. I did treat Jacob differently. I've always treated him differently. Why? Because he needed it more. He was always struggling, always needing help. You were always so capable, so together. You didn't seem to need anything from me. Everyone needs their father, Dad, even capable daughters, maybe especially capable daughters who keep carrying everyone else's weight. I see that now, and I'm ashamed," he confessed. "You deserved better from me. You deserved better than being treated like the family ATM. You deserved better than being kicked out of your home. You deserved a father who appreciated you instead of taking advantage of you." It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. Does it change anything? I considered his question carefully. The most honest words he'd spoken in years hanging heavy between us. It doesn't change what happened, I told him, standing my ground. But it means something that you can finally see it. It means something that you can admit that you took me for granted and failed me as a father. Can we start over? Build something better? He asked, trying to grasp for a clean slate. Maybe eventually, but not now. I need more time, I said, refusing to be rushed back into a role that nearly destroyed me. And I need you to understand that our relationship going forward is going to look very different. I'm not your caretaker anymore. I'm not your financial support. I'm your daughter, and that's all I can be right now. I needed to be absolutely clear, leaving no room for future manipulation or guilt trips. Do you understand? Because understanding means not calling me when the bills are tight. Understanding means not guilt-tripping me about not visiting enough. Understanding means letting me live my own life without making me feel bad about it. Yes, I understand, he finally said. We finished our coffee in uncomfortable silence, but it felt like something had shifted. Not fixed, maybe never fully fixed, but shifted towards something more honest. As I drove home, I felt lighter somehow. The anger I'd been carrying for months had finally loosened its grip. I had said what I needed to say, and Dad had actually listened. That was more than I'd ever expected. Life moved forward. Spring arrived in Kansas City, bringing warmer weather and new possibilities. The catering company promoted me to operations manager, which came with a significant raise. I was building something real, something that was entirely mine. Kelly had become my chosen family, the person who showed up for me without being asked, who supported me without expecting anything in return. Dad and I spoke once a week, brief calls where we kept things surface level. He'd stopped complaining about his situation and, crucially, stopped asking for money. Progress, even if it was small. Jacob had slowly become a better brother. Not perfect, but better. He was seeing a therapist and working on himself, humbled by the whole experience. We'd grab lunch occasionally and have real, civil conversations. The damage ran deep, but the resentment was slowly being replaced by guarded respect. Then, one day in June, Aunt Patricia called again. "Camila, I wanted to let you know something," she said. "Your father's been telling people about what really happened, about how much you did for him, how you supported him for years, how badly he treated you. He was finally telling the truth. Not to win me back, not to make himself look better, just because it was the truth." A week later, he called me. "Would you come to dinner? I'm making pot roast. Your favorite. Just you and me. No ambushes, no guilt trips, just dinner with your old man." I went. The house looked different, clean and more like a home again. My old bedroom had been turned into an impersonal guest room. As we were cleaning up, Dad said something unexpected. "I've been thinking about selling the house. It's too big for just me. Too many memories, too much maintenance." He was finally taking responsibility for his own life. "The equity from the house will help me be more financially stable. I won't need to rely on anyone." He paused, then looked me straight in the eye. "I won't need to take advantage of my daughter's generosity anymore. I've been selfish for years," he admitted. "I've been making excuses instead of making changes. That stops. Now, I'm taking responsibility for my own life." I felt tears prick my eyes, no longer tears of pain, but of pride. "I'm proud of you," I told him. He hugged me then, really hugged me, for the first time in almost a year. 6 months later, I stood in the living room of my new apartment. Not the tiny studio, but a real one-bedroom place with a balcony and enough space to actually entertain. Kelly was helping me hang pictures on the walls. "This place is perfect," she said, stepping back to admire our work. It really was. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. He was settled into his new senior apartment. He was managing, happy, and truly independent for the first time in years. Our relationship had evolved into something healthier, boundaried, but warm. Jacob texted in our sibling group chat. "Dinner this weekend, my treat. Want to celebrate your promotion?" The catering company had made me a partner, giving me a stake in the business and a path toward eventually opening my own. Location. I was getting my business management degree, and my career was finally taking off. I looked around my apartment at the life I'd built from scratch after losing everything. The furniture I'd saved up for. The career that was finally taking off. None of it would have happened if I'd stayed in that house, stayed in that role of the sacrificial daughter who gave everything and received nothing. Getting kicked out had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Jacob found steady work and started contributing to Dad's care in meaningful ways. Stephanie, I heard, had remarried in Denver and was someone else's problem now. Dad was thriving in his new apartment, making friends, and finally taking responsibility for his own well-being. As for me, I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, that walking away from toxicity wasn't abandonment, that sometimes the greatest act of love is loving yourself enough to leave. I'd spent years being the good daughter, and where had it gotten me? Kicked out and broke. Now I was the daughter who chose herself, and I'd never been happier. I was free.